Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next Master Lecture in the GoFly Master Lecture series. As you all know, we are so pleased to have Boeing as our main sponsor for the competition, and so excited to have Pratt & Whitney as our corporate sponsor, along with many other in-kind and supporting partners. Today, we are so excited to have Sandy Yamane from the FAA. He is the UAS program manager and will be walking you all through the FAA certification process. So I hand it over to Sandy now.
Thank you. Can everybody see the first slide?
Looks great, Sandy. Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. My name is Sandy Yamane. I'm the U.S. Program Manager with the FAA Aircraft Certification Service under System Oversight Division, Air 800. And pretty much this presentation is kind of my Cliff Notes version of FAA certification for the GoFly participants. Pretty much a brief background on myself. I've been in FAA for about 21 years. Started off as an aviation safety inspector with the Los Angeles MITO in 1998. Transferred to the Van Nuys MITO, which is in California, in 2001. And in 2011, I was the senior aviation safety inspector. And as a senior, I was a senior lead for the Spaceship One, Spaceship Two projects, straddle launch, and various scale composites aircraft. During that time frame, I also was a U.S. subject matter expert for the Van Nuys office, which eventually kind of tied into 4 other MITOs in the West Coast, working with Seattle, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and Van Nuys. With that, pretty much kind of assisted a lot of the MITOs on certification. During that time frame as well, I've also worked very closely with the Los Angeles Aircraft Certification Office on the USTC projects. I actually did the conformity inspections and restricted airworthiness certificates for the in-situ scan eagles and for the AV Pumas. I also did the amended airworthiness certifications for the in-situ scan eagles for the Pathfinder 3 US project that was for the Beyond Visual Line of Sight operations in New Mexico. And just recently, as of June of this year, I was selected as the new U.S. program manager. So I'm basically in the new position, almost kind of at the moment in one-man office. But again, you know, pretty extensive background in UAS and some of these special projects involving very high-tech, unique type of technology. So. Okay, moving on. Here's a quick overview of the discussion that we'll be going through. I'll be providing some information on aircraft registration, discuss foreign aircraft, some high-level information on Part 103 and Part 107. Also kind of touch on Section 44807 exemptions. We'll also address the general airworthiness certifications, which basically applies to both man and U.S. certifications. So if we're ready, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, on this slide, again, this only applies to U.S. Applicants on the aircraft registration. Hopefully all teams should have or be in the process of obtaining their aircraft registrations. Aircraft registration is a prerequisite for airworthiness certifications, and the FAA will not issue an airworthiness certificate unless the applicant has an aircraft registration, which is AC Form 8050-3 or a temporary registration fax from AFSM 50, which is out of Oklahoma City. The first one you see is 14 CFR Part 47, which is our traditional aircraft registration, which is mostly for manned aircraft. It also includes large UAS, which is over 55 pounds. If you do register your large UAS or your manned aircraft, you'll have to mark your aircraft per 14 CFR Part 45. With that, I also have a link to FAA Advisory Circular 45-2E, which provides information on fireproof ID plates, displaying the words experimental on the aircraft and the size and locations of the end numbers. I do also want to note that with UAS, since they're very unique and they may not meet some of the marking requirements on the 45, we do have provisions in there to mark the end numbers as large as practicable. Or we do have a provision under 4522D that due to the configuration of the aircraft that you can apply for a different marking procedure. The next one is 14 CFR Part 48, which is for small UAS, which is under 55 pounds. This part pretty much addresses both registration and marking of the small UAS. One of the things I also want to kind of recommend too, especially when you're dealing with the Part 47 part, I recommend reserving the end number prior to submitting the applications for the registration. And the reason for that is that when you do make your airworthiness application, that you're going to need your end number. So what happens is most applicants will go online, reserve an end number, and then go ahead and submit the hard copy registration forms. And then now they have an end number to use for their 8130-6 airworthiness application form and their end number for the program letters. There is a note, registration is not required for Part 103 applicants. So per 14 CFR 103.7, registration is not required. Okay, next slide is for foreign aircraft. Again, hopefully all foreign teams should have or be in the process of obtaining their foreign aircraft registration. With this, you have to register your aircraft with your Foreign Civil Airworthiness Authority. With that, we also highly recommend that the foreign participants obtain their airworthiness certificate or permit to fly document from their Foreign Civil Aviation Authority. In addition, we also highly recommend that you conduct initial flight testing in your country prior to the GoFly event. With the nature with the experimental R&D aircraft, things do go wrong, and you definitely want to try to, flight test it and have everything pretty much set prior to coming over to the United States for the GoFly event. You don't want to be trying to figure things out like a week or two before, because like I said, you may have to make modifications to the aircraft. You may have to do a few things to get it working as designed. So it's highly recommended that, again, just get your certificate and do your initial flight test ops in your country. When you do bring your aircraft into the United States, the FAA will be issuing special flight authorizations to foreign aircraft per FAA Order 8130.2J. There's Chapter 22. And that also includes U.S. With that as well, there's a note that also for small USs, if you have a foreign registered small US, you may operate under Part 107 with a 14 CFR Part 375 foreign aircraft permit. Okay, Part 103. Most people probably know this as the ultralight rule. Again, aircraft registration is not required under 14 CFR 103.7. For those applicants, I do recommend contacting the FSDO as early as possible to review and determine if the vehicle meets Part 103 requirements. I do have hyperlinks to 14 CFR 103.1, which outlines the requirements for meeting ultralight, and also have a hyperlink to AC 103-7, which kind of gives you more detailed information on meeting the 103 ultralight requirements. By chance, if your vehicle does not meet Part 103 requirements, the vehicle will have to be registered and certificate as an aircraft. Next, Part 107. This is the operating rule for small USs. First bullet, you have to have it registered as a small US under Part 48. You'll be operating under Part 107 Subpart B. In order to operate, you'll need to have a remote pod certificate in Subpart C. Kind of reemphasize foreign small US may operate under Part 107 with 14 CFR Part 375 aircraft, foreign aircraft permit. If there's, by chance, if there's anything that would be outside the scope of operating under 107, there's a list of regulations that are subject to waiver per 14 CFR 107.205. And in order to request 107 waiver, you'll go through the FAA Drone Zone website. Okay, section 44807 exemptions. Basically, it falls under Title 49 in the United States Code, section 44807, which is special authority for certain unmanned aircraft systems. This kind of came about from the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018. Prior to that, it used to be called section 333, which is under, back then it was under the 2012 FAA Modernization and Reform Act, which it was codified in Public Law 112-95. With the 44807 exemption, you'll need to submit a petition for exemption under section 44807. A definition of an exemption, basically, it's a petition for exemption is a request to the FAA by individual or entity asking for relief from the requirements of a current regulation, and that's defined in 14 CFR 11-15. With that, there is some guidance on the FAA website. Again, if you go over this hyperlink up here, there's, again, it kind of steps you to the process, and there's a document called Public Guidance for Petitions for Exemption, which this document describes the information petitioners should submit specifically to request FAA authorization to operate AUS in the National Airspace System. Continued on, as in order to operate under the exemption, you also need to apply for a blanket COA to operate under the exemption. Again, if it's under 400 feet, you'll have this blanket COA. This is a separate process, which you'll have to coordinate with FAA Air Traffic. By chance, if you're unable to operate under the blanket COA, you'll have to apply for a full COA. Kind of another note, petitions for exemption is a lengthy process. They say it's approximately about 120 days. So again, I do have a hyperlink to the FAA website, which provides more detailed information on petitions for exemptions. And section 44807, again, this is a link to the actual, to the regulation, which it sunsets on September 30th, 2023. So if you do have a 44807 exemption, and then you approach, once you get to September 30th, 2023, basically after that, your 44807 exemption is no longer valid. This one I just added this morning. I did I saw saw the spreadsheet from Sue, and I noticed a lot of foreign applicants were considering going 44807, which if the foreign teams want to go under 44807, they'll need to get a 14 CFR Part 375 foreign aircraft permit in order to operate under the exemption if granted. Okay, general airworthiness certification. Again, this is very high level, and this basically applies to both manned and unmanned certifications with the focus on the airworthiness application form, which is the FAA Form 8130-6 and the program letter. As part of the application, the very first form will be the FAA Form 8130-6, which is the application for US Airworthiness Certificate. In order to fill it out, I do have a hyperlink to AC 21-12C, which provides you the block by block instructions to fill out the form. Also refer to figures D13 and D17. D17 is an example of what a manned application should look like, and for D17, it's an example of an unmanned aircraft system application. When you do fill out the form, you'll be completing sections 1 through 3. Some high-level notes, which is pretty much some of the common errors I normally see on certifications forms, is that make sure on section 1 that ensure that the information on the aircraft registration and ID plate, this is for Part 47, match section 1. You'd be quite surprised how often that when I do a error certification, I do see some errors between the aircraft registration form, the application, ID plate. So make sure all three match. To continue on section 2, you want to make sure you check off special error certificate for experimental. There's 2 purposes you want to apply for. You want to apply for research and development, which will be done for initial flight testing. And then for the GoFly event, it has to be done under exhibition. The purpose of exhibition is usually for an aviation event or air show, which this applies. So need to make sure that, again, R&D when you do your flight testing and the exhibition for the GoFly competition. And on section 3, please ensure that the registrar's name and address is exactly shown on the aircraft registration certificate. Signature in section 3 needs to be done by the registered owner or authorized agent. If there's an authorized agent signing the form on the owner's behalf, you'll need to have a notarized agent letter from the owner. If the registered owner is a corporation, the form needs to be signed by a person level responsible for the corporation. So we do have situations where you may have a secretary that's signing on behalf of a vice president. Well, it cannot be signed by the secretary. It needs to be signed by a director or a VP, or again, a higher level agent of the company. And then also in section 3, we do have a block in there which is for errors directives, and you have to list down the biweekly, which that can be found in the FAA Regulatory Guidance Library under errors directive section, which I provided a hyperlink. As a matter of fact, if you see below, this is kind of a picture of what it looks like. So when you go into the RGL, go to the errors directives, basically this will pop up. You'll have to select 80 biweekly, and then click on this twisted for small aircraft. And then based on the date of your application, you want to put the latest biweekly. So if I was making an application for today, November 4th, 2019, the biweekly that's going to be listed in there would be 2019-22. Okay, let's see. Okay, here's a couple examples of the -6 form. It's kind of hard to see, so I'll go ahead and bring it up, zoom it in. So like I kind of mentioned before, this is for a manned aircraft. This is for experimental research and development. So when you do make your application, again, section 1, make sure this information is per your aircraft registration ID plate. Make sure it all matches. In section 2, you'll select special error certificate, experimental, and then for manned aircraft, you'll have research and development, and over here you'll have exhibition. Section 3, again, just to reemphasize, this information should be exactly per the aircraft registration certificate. Over here, put NAs, and then here's the errors directive. So this is the biweekly. Make sure this is checked off and enter the biweekly. Going through the form, ensure this is checked off. A lot of times, a lot of folks will miss this, so make sure this is checked off. Put down the total airframe hours. If you don't have any, you'll put down 0. And for experimental only, you'll put down 0. The date of the application, the name and title of the person signing the form, and the signature. Again, if you actually have an agent signing the form, you'll just put down agent here. But with this, we'll need to have the notarized agent letter. For the unmanned aircraft portion, very similar. The difference is you'll have experimental. And there's a block lower that has unmanned aircraft. So you want to check unmanned aircraft. Just to kind of let you know, this is an older form. If you use the 2018 form, there's also a block for exhibition. So basically, you want to make sure R&D and exhibition is checked off under unmanned aircraft. Pretty much Section 2 and Section 3 is very similar to the manned, with the exception of the unmanned aircraft block. Okay, program letter. Pretty much it's required by 14 CFR 21193. The purpose of a program letter is to provide the objectives and the purpose of the experiment, which in this case will be research and development and exhibition. As part of the program letter, provide the time and number of flights for the experiment. Probably the key area I really want to focus on is the areas for which the experiment will be conducted. So when you do airworthiness certification, again, it's highly recommended that you do your airworthiness certification, your flight testing at your home location. So in your program letter, provide a operating area for the initial flight testing for R&D, and you also provide the GoFly event operating areas for exhibition. So with the GoFly event operating areas under exhibition, you can get that from your GoFly organizers, as I know that Sue has been working with air traffic on the operating areas. When you're for the home location, one thing I would highly recommend is that try to keep it reasonable, and you definitely want to keep it. You want to avoid densely populated areas and airspace. So if you don't want it in the city where there's there's airports or a lot of people around. So if you do have an area that's that's reasonable in size where you can conduct your initial flight test. If you're not too sure, you can always contact the local FAA office and find out which areas they would highly recommend. With myself, I live in Southern California. We do get a lot of applicants, and they want to fly Ventura County, Los Angeles. I do usually have to coordinate with the flight standards office to find out which areas are acceptable. So, but normally, we try to take them away from the city and keep them out in the area where there's nobody around and there's no very limited air traffic. That way, to prevent any possible incidents or accidents. So, if you're not too sure, you can contact me or go ahead and then you can contact your local FAA office. And if you're not too sure, again, if you contact me, I can steer you in the right direction, let you know which office that you probably should contact. And with the program, I also provide three view drawings or pictures of the aircraft to identify the aircraft. The program letter, again, it's required by 21193, and basically is considered part of the application. So with that, do not provide any type of proprietary or sensitive information in the program letter, because when we do certify the aircraft, it goes into the aircraft database, which becomes part of the FAA official records. So, which FAA records are subject to release to the public on a FOIA request. So, it's highly recommended that don't have any proprietary sensitive information in the program letter. For manned aircraft certification, that's going to be done under FAA Order 8130.2J. I do reference chapters 4, 10, and 12. Chapters 4 is pretty much the main part of the special airworthiness certification process. Chapter 10 addresses R&D, and Chapter 12 addresses exhibition. So again, part of the application process, you need FAA Form 813-6 and a program letter. In the 2J, there is a sample program letter in Appendix C. So rather than trying to create your own, you can go to Appendix C of the order, and you'll have a sample program letter, which it does provide certain information for R&D and exhibition. So that'll definitely help. Part of the once you make application, the FAA is going to review the application. And then once everything looks fine, we coordinate the airspace with the FSDO operations ASIs for that area. We normally schedule the aircraft inspection, which also includes a review of the airworthiness directive, any airworthiness directive that applies. We also review the marking on the aircraft. We also review the aircraft maintenance records, as well as the aircraft and cockpit. And at the very end, the FAA issues the airworthiness certificate with operating limitations, and just with R&D, it's going to be good for 1 year. So, once you got your airworthiness certificate and operating limitations, and you start operating the aircraft, I would recommend that maybe maybe 30 to 60 days prior to it expiring, to go ahead and contact your FAA office and go ahead and apply for renewal. So that way you don't have any break in operations. Okay, U.S. certification, that's done on FAA ORE 13.34 Delta. On the right side, you'll see a little process flow chart, which I definitely recommend reviewing. Again, this is, when I'm training new ASIs on U.S. certifications, this is one of the very first errors I point out, because again, this is kind of a lengthy order. There's a lot of information in the order. It kind of bounces back and forth. Unfortunately, it's not a very sequential order. So one thing I've always recommend to applicants as well as ASIs is to follow this process here. It makes it simple. Also with that, with the process flow chart, if you look on the lower right-hand side, there's references here. So basically, if you want more detailed information of the actual processes itself, like for example, like on the first one, just says go to Chapter 3, Section 2, Paragraph 7. So you can go to that paragraph and it'll give you the detailed information. Here refers you to Chapter 3, Section 1, Paragraph 3B, 4B. It also refers you to Chapter 3, Section 2, Paragraphs 5 or 6. So this is very helpful. So again, this is very high level, which will kind of step you through the process. For more information, just go to the specific paragraphs. Pretty much like was said before, FAA Form 8130-6 will be required, the program letter. Also in the 34 Delta, there's an Appendix C, which has a sample program letter. In addition to the program, there's also a safety checklist, which is listed in Appendix D. There's going to be a group. This group is part of our process. Once we do receive the -6 program and safety checklist, the FAA ASI does a risk assessment, and we use this Appendix E to determine the applicant task. So right here you say NA Group 1. So I'll probably be flipping back and forth shortly, but for Group 1s, it's not applicable. Very important with the safety checklist, because that provides the configurations, the current and planned configurations for the UAS. Like I kind of stated before, the program letter provides the objectives, the purpose, and the areas. The safety checklist provides the FAA the configurations of the UAS, and we use this document to evaluate the hazards unique to your UAS. But the safety checklist, this document can have proprietary and sensitive information, as it's not a regulatory requirement. It's not part of the official FAA aircraft record, so you can actually put it in the safety checklist. However, I do recommend that if you have proprietary information in the safety checklist, that you do stamp it as such. That way, if the FAA does receive a FOIA request, basically, it goes through a review process, and if they see proprietary sensitive information stamped on it, they won't release it to the public. Again, applicant task, we'll go back shortly on that. Once that's been determined, we do set up a FAA certification team. The MITO ASI is going to be the focal with that. They're going to be responsible on coordinating with the applicant as well as the certification team. The members of the certification team includes air traffic, which is AGV 115. We have a technical engineer from AUS 420, which is the FAA integration, US integration office. We do have an Ops ASI from AFS 830, which is the general aviation support. And then we also have the Geographical Flight Standards District Office involved with part of the team. With that, your program letter safety checklist gets reviewed by the team. If there's any questions, they'll coordinate with the MITO focal. We know when we work with the applicant. If everything looks fine and if there's no major questions or concerns, we basically schedule a safety evaluation with the applicant. This is where the applicant provides a briefing to this FAA certification team on the system. They'll basically go through the safety checklist and answer any questions that might come up from the cert team. Once that's completed, we'll basically take a look at this applicant task and all the possible questions that came up from the safety evaluation, and then we make a determination if we're at a point where we're ready to do the certification. Once we're about ready to schedule the certification, the FAA MITO ASI will create the operating limitations. As part of this process, again, when we're working with air traffic basically generates the COA. The COA is pretty much forwarded to the MITO ASI. And then once we're ready, basically the MITO ASI will work with the applicant on scheduling the on-site inspection, which certain members of this team will be attending. We will conduct an on-site inspection, which also includes the aircraft inspection of the UAS. And once that's completed, the applicant will receive the aero certificate, operating limitations, and the COA, which is FAA Form 77-1. Just like the MAN, the aero certificate is in the operating limitations is only valid for 1 year. Also, as part of the on-site inspection, we do also conduct, also witness an initial flight test. So it'd be very simple, but again, if you're bringing your US to the GoFly event, it's highly recommend that you've already done certification, you've have your COAs, and you've already done your initial flight testing. So with the US certification, if you plan to have it done, certification and your flight test in your home location, since I'm the US program manager for Air 800, which I basically work with all the MITOs in the country, so you can go ahead and submit your applications into me, and then I'll coordinate with the appropriate MITO office and get everything rolling on the FAA certification team. Going back to this applicant task, and this is going to be very important because as you probably see, again, I'll kind of zoom in, it might be a little bit hard to see. As part of our certification, right before we start everything, we evaluate the actual system itself and see where it falls. As you probably see, we have different categories. So we do have number of point values. We have special considerations. And on page 2 of the Appendix E, we do have a grouping. So our main goal here is to focus on staying in groups 1 and 2. The reason for that, once you cross into group 3, there's more applicant tasks, and probably the big one here is probably the maintenance inspection program, which part of the 80900.1 order, that has to go through. It's a separate document. We'll have to run everything through the Flight Standards District Office, and it has to be accepted. So if you stay within groups 1 and groups 2, basically we would limit applicant tasks. So you see a lot of shoulds. In reference to the 34 Delta order, should is a recommended practice. So but it's going to be very important that you stay within groups 1 and 2, which you see the point values for groups 1 and 2. You also want to stay away of checking, yes on special considerations, because anything yes is considered special consideration, which automatically takes you to group 3. So you want to focus on initial flight test. You want to focus on the GoFly event, and that's basically it. If you want additional purposes or additional special considerations, you can put a request in after the event, and then we can always amend the certificate and operating limitations to address. So like, again, after the event's over, if you want to do night operations, or if you want to do beyond visual line of sight operations, or chase aircraft, we can do it afterwards. But again, you just want to focus on initial flight tests and R&D and the GoFly event under exhibition, because again, we want to stay away from group 3. Also, if you do decide to, for additional purposes, and go into other areas, if you do request that update, if you're hypothetically, if you're in group 2, and then after the GoFly event, you want to do beyond visual line of sight operations, well, again, you'll put the request in, but be prepared that you'll be crossing over from group 2 to group 3, and you'll be required to complete the tasks for group 3. So again, this should be done afterwards, but if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me. I can step you through the process. Okay, that's pretty much all I had. Again, this is kind of, again, a more like Cliff's Notes version on FAA certification processes. So in summary, we went over the aircraft registration process. We discussed foreign aircraft. We touched on parts 103 and 107. We also addressed section 44807 exemptions. We discussed general air certifications, again, the -6 and program letters, and we also touched on manned aircraft certification, US certifications. Okay, I guess at this point, I'll go ahead and just turn this over to Nidhi and see if there's any questions that came in during the brief.
Great. Thanks so much, Sandy. Really informative and very dense with information. So we certainly will give our teams a few moments to gather their thoughts and submit their questions. The first question we have is a team that says their aircraft will be in group 2. And they're asking, what is the fastest path to get permission to operate UAS with a weight of 55 pounds or more?
Well, I checked on the 44807 exemptions this morning. Basically, those are running about 120 days. So probably group 2, I would say the fastest route to go is go through the special airman certification and the 34 Delta.
Okay. Jim and Sue, anything that you'd like to add, given what you have learned from the teams? You are muted in case you're trying to talk. In the meantime, Sandy, can ultralight be operated remotely with a pilot on board? Sandy?
Yep. Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, if you're operating you can't operate you can't operate a 103 vehicle, as a UAS. Basically, you have to meet 103 requirements, and if you're unable to meet 103, then you'll have to register it and have certification as an aircraft. So that would have to probably fall under 8130.34 Delta process.
Okay, and where should we send the printed application forms to?
The applications, with that, I would recommend just go ahead and fill them out. You can send, I would recommend all teams just go ahead and send it to me. And I don't need the original signed -6s of program letters. Basically, you can go ahead and scan it and send it to me via email. And then with that, I'll go ahead and forward it to the appropriate FAA offices and work with them on getting the certification started. Again, that's for the manned aircraft on the .2. For the 34 process, we'll need the -6 program letter and the safety checklist. And again, I will coordinate that with the appropriate MITO office on certification.
So Sandy, just to be perfectly clear then, those applications can be scanned electronically and then emailed to you. Nothing needs to be physically mailed to you. Is that correct?
That's correct. Basically, just hold on to the signed forms. Well, actually, what I'll probably do is I'll do a cursory review of the application. And if I see anything wrong, I'll respond back, say, what needs to be fixed on the form or program letter.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that's been updated and I have we call it an acceptable form, I'll handle the coordination with appropriate offices.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Sandy, this is Sue.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we talked about was for having each of the teams send it to me and me pass it on to Sandy. Is that something, Sandy, you still want to continue to do?
That's fine, but that works. Or if they want to send it to me directly, which is fine, but as long as they copy you on it.
Yes, that's fine. Mm-hmm.
That's fine.
Okay, great.
I think we just want to keep in the loop on everybody, so that's a way to ensure we're coordinated from the GoFly team.
Okay, thanks. But yeah, with the original signed forms, make sure they have them available at time of aircraft certification, because they'll need to present the original forms to the FAA inspector or designee.
Thank you so much, Sue and Sandy, on that one. The N number registration is required for applying for Section 44807.
That's correct, yes. With that too, as part of the 44807, they also have to apply for a COA. So which, again, if it's under 400 feet, it's going to be a blanket COA. It's a separate process. They will need the N number to process the COA.
Okay. What is the complete timeline for a team interested in acquiring Section 44807 exemption? That is, how long can the whole process take? Sandy?
Oh, yep. Sorry about that. Yeah, the 44807. Yeah, it's there's a link on my PowerPoint presentation which takes you to some of the general information on the FAA website on 44807 processing. And with that, they suggest it takes approximately 120 days. So, which, again, unfortunately, I would say I'm a little concerned about, because you may have missed that window already if you already haven't submitted your petition for exemption.
Do you need to provide design analysis documentation as part of the FAA certification process?
No. Usually, a lot of folks will sit there and provide a high-level review, basically a description of their system. If you actually go to, especially for the UAS, there's a safety checklist, which basically, if you go through it itself, it kind of steps you through what's required, and you'll have to provide details. Again, a very high level of the actual system itself, what's some of its subsystems, what type of loss link, flight termination system. So one thing I would highly recommend for those applying for UAS under 34 Delta, that when you do provide your program and safety checklist, basically most applicants will take those two documents and they use it as their little template, and they basically answer the question. So treat it like a question and answer format document. Folks will sit there and just, again, take those templates and just answer the questions, and basically either highlight them highlight the answers or have their answers in a different color. So, I mean, there's various ways of doing it, but it makes it easier for them to answer the questions. It makes it easier for the CERT team to review the documents. That way, you know, you try to keep a standardized format.
Okay. How long does it take to get general airworthiness certification for UAS Group 2?
That's kind of a hard question. I mean, unfortunately, you know, we don't have a specific time frame. It all depends. I mean, I've seen it as fast. I've seen it quickly, you know, done within 60 days. I've seen it take as long as you know, a year, but a lot of it's usually on the applicant. So if the applicant can, again, early on, understand what their tasks are and provides those documents in a timely manner, it can, I would say, anywhere between 45 to 90 days for a Group 1, Group 2.
Okay. Do we have to get our FAA N number approved prior to sending the form to you, Sandy, even if we reserved an available N number?
Yeah, well, no, it doesn't. Basically, we will need the actual, we'll need to review the hard copy registration at time of certification. So if they reserve a N number, and they can use that N number to fill out their -6 and their program or any other forms. But as long as at the time we do the airworthiness certification, that they have actually had their hard copy.
Okay. What type of pilot's license is required for flight exemption 44807, and what type is required for UAS certification?
Yeah, pilot certification, at least for under 34 Delta, needs to be Part 61. Normally it's private pilot, rec, sport, anything, you know, except for students. So that's usually the minimum. For 44807, basically, again, when you're dealing with an exemption, you're trying to, you're basically going to request the current regulations. So you know, preferably Part 61, but you could request, you know, if they have a remote pilot certificate under 107, you could request for it. But again, I can't, when you're dealing with other FAA offices, I think I've had this discussion with Sue in regards to the actual UAS itself. So if you had a smaller UAS and you want to request, rather than having Part 61, you want to use a 107 certificate at RPC, you may put that as part of your request, but you'll have to provide some mitigations to that. So,
Sandy, this is Sue. I just wanted to add a quick point. Because the competition is a personal flying device, they're all going to be over 55 pounds, unless they're one of the few teams that's just going to have their prototype there to showcase on the last day or a static display.
okay. Yeah, I mean, like the example I sent you on my response back to you in regards to that question, I mean, if you're going to go for an exemption for like say like a 2,000 pound Predator UAS, you know, they might, you know, you're going to request 107, pretty good chance they'll probably get denied. But if you have a UAS that's probably, you know, one or 200 pounds, 107, if you provide the mitigations for that, you know, they may grant it. So again, it's hard to say because, you know, you have various FAA organizations reviewing it, so it's everything's reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So Part 61 is preferred, but for 44807, you can make a request.
Thank you. I think that helps. And I think understanding what you're saying is that the basic complexity of the aircraft, if it's closer to 107 than it is to a Predator, it's more likely they're going to get it approved.
Yes,
which
correct.
is typically what these are that we're looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, if they're closer to 107, then pretty good chance they'll probably accept it. But yeah, if it's a high complex, large UAS, you know, off to, you know, scale to the left, then there's a pretty good chance they may get denied. So
Okay, we have several more questions, so we'll try and get through them. It seems that N number registration should be done by being physically mailed. There is an address on the cover letter of the N number registration form for UAS 55 pounds or more. Sandy, if you could clarify.
Yeah, yeah. Usually registration, I'm not too involved with. I can probably, I'll take that as an action item to follow up on information on that.
Okay, great. So we will follow up with you and get back to the teams in terms of where exactly and how they should be submitting their N number registration form. Can we still send the forms if the N number registration hasn't been approved by the aircraft registry?
Yes. That's the reason why I recommend applying for, basically going and reserving the number first, because if you went ahead and didn't reserve it and then submit your application, you may be waiting 60 days before we get your N number, which, you know, now you're kind of very, very close. So if you reserve an N number now, at least you know what, you know, it'll be in process, but, you know, at least you have something to fill out your -6 and your program letter, and we can use that to start the certification process, but you will need to have the hard copy registration certificate at time of certification.
Can we submit the 34 application before the completion of the N number registration and submit the N number later?
Well, the problem is part of the certification process on the 34 Delta, we do the COA, and normally they all need an N number for the COA. So if the N number is to be determined, that could possibly cause some problems. So again, it's highly recommended to reserve an N number prior to submitting the hard copy application forms.
Okay.
Sandy, this is Sue. I just wanted to emphasize, you know, and I've been emphasizing this with the teams too, is they have the link there that you provided, and they also got an email with the link from your presentation for reserving their N number, and it's highly recommended they choose one, and if that one that they select in the system allows it to go through, then that's the N number they should use for their application or for the exemption, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Does UAS certification require a physical inspection by a representative from the FAA?
Yes, as part of the on-site inspection, we do, the team will actually go out, and the FAA, basically in this case, it'll be a MITO inspector, will actually do, we'll review the records, we'll review the documents. We do a physical inspection of the GCS and unmanned aircraft. We also do, we'll check data connectivity. We do a flight control check with the GCS. And then once everything looks good, basically we will issue out the certificate of limitations and COA from air traffic. We do brief the applicant on the limitations. We'll actually go through each limitations and kind of explain what each limitation is. And as part of the on-site inspection, we also request to witness a flight test, which again, it could be just taking it on up, going around in pattern, whatever. Basically, normally witness that as part of the on-site and certification of the UAS.
Next question, Sandy, is would I be able to operate a manned Part 103 type using a radio control handset or Bluetooth controller on board instead of a hardwired system? And how does that affect the regulations if control can be handed over to a ground-based controller?
Yeah, can you repeat that again?
Sure. So would I be able to operate a manned Part 103 type using a radio control handset or Bluetooth controller on board instead of a hardwired system? And how does that affect the regulations if control can be handed over to a ground-based controller?
Okay. Yeah. Once you go remote, now you're outside of 103. So you're not going to be able to operate you'll have to go under, if you actually have a person on board and you're going to have it remotely operated, that's what we call an optionally piloted aircraft. It still follows FAA Order 8013.34 Delta. We do have provisions for OPA, which is optionally piloted aircraft. So in this case here, you'll have to have your, basically the vehicle will have to be treated as an aircraft, because again, when you won't be able to meet 103. So you'll have to have it registered as an aircraft. You'll have to certificate it as an aircraft under 34 Delta. And then we'll have to probably treat it as an optionally piloted aircraft if you're going to have somebody on board and it's going to be remotely piloted.
Okay. So we have a team that wants to confirm the COA is required before the 34 application, and how about for the 44807?
For the 34 Delta, the COA is actually part of the process. So what actually happens is once we get the program, the -6 program on safety checklist, we do submit it to air traffic. This case will be Steve Pansky. He does an airspace feasibility assessment, and then basically he'll determine if it's good or not. If he says it's good, basically he'll start working on the COA, drafting the COA, and basically, and with that, the MITO ASI will forward the documents to the team. So basically, it's two processes running in parallel, and then at the very end, when we're ready, once everything's set, safety evaluations accomplished, the applicant's done their task, and are ready to do the certification. Again, the COA's process, that's forwarded to the MITO ASI, and then the MITO ASI will go out and do the certification, issue out the certificate, the operations, and present the COA as well. So that's all part of the 34. For the 44807, that's a separate process. You go to the website for 44807. I think that there's a link that takes you to the COA process. So the 44807 request is one process, and you have to submit a request for the COA separately.
Sandy, this is Sue. I just wanted to add that we were going to help the teams, per my discussion with Steve Pansky, kind of develop a generic program letter and provide them for the COA, the airspace specific for Half Moon Bay and for Moffett Field, and then give them an example of what they would need to put together the requirements for the airspace where they're flight testing their aircraft.
Yeah,
and we'll share that to expedite things.
Yeah, that's definitely fine for the GoFly event. But if they're planning to do initial flight testing at their home location, they should also provide a reasonable location in their home area to do it.
Yeah.
This is very, very high. I don't want to stress this more, but it's going to be very important. You don't want to be figuring things out at the event. When you're dealing with experimental R&D aircraft, things go wrong. And having it done a week or two before the GoFly event, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but it's usually a recipe for trouble.
We will help them identify what their airspace requirements are for their local flight testing area. And the example we'll give them for Moffett Field and Half Moon Bay, where a good portion of them will be practicing in advance or flight testing in advance, so that they know exactly what to submit, and that Steve is looking for
Okay.
it. And he emphasized, and you've been emphasizing too, the importance of getting the program letter done as quickly as possible so that he can begin coordinating those airspace requirements. Yes.
Yeah. I know things will come up very quickly, and preferably, you want to do flight testing as soon as possible. That way, because again, when you're dealing with experimental R&D aircraft, things don't work out as planned or as designed. It's very common for experimental R&D aircraft that you usually have some type of aircraft modification. So, and again, it's something you don't really want to be figuring out when it gets closer to the event. If you can, preferably if you can do the initial flight testing at home location, make any type of modification that's necessary. The GoFly event the practice areas probably should be used for more like fine tuning purposes. So again, it's highly recommended that all teams, do their initial flight test at their home location.
Sandy, we are at the hour, but we have a few more questions if you're able to stay on.
Sure.
Okay, great. What is the average time between the physical inspection by the FAA representative and the UAS certification being fully completed?
Again, well, it's hard to give an actual time frame for that. So, usually, well, again, this is kind of a high-level event. We're definitely going to be working with other offices during the U.S. certification process. So we'll probably definitely going to be expediting the reviews for this. So, but yeah, again, the sooner the better. I definitely would like to see at least the applications coming in, anytime this month, or as if it goes beyond, I would say probably before the holidays in December, we're going to be very very close. So I would highly recommend that, again, trying to get your applications in either this month or no later than probably mid-December.
Okay. We have a team sort of seeking further clarity, Sandy, on the COA and the Delta 34. So does the COA is part of the 34 mean we have to finish the N number registration before starting the 34 process, or can we start the 34 and complete the N number registration later?
Yeah, I mean, as long as if you have a N number that's already reserved, you can start the process now. That way you can fill out your -6 in your program letter.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
most applicants do that. They'll sit there and reserve the number, and then once they have the number reserved, they'll submit their applications. And then basically, again, it takes time to go through the 34 Delta process. So I think right now, like the Part 47 registrations, those are taking approximately between 30 to 60 days. So as long as you have an N number to put on the application forms, that's all we're looking for right now. But you will need to have that hard copy registration at time of certification.
We just have a question regarding your presentation, Sandy, and your contact information. So you have kindly offered to share the presentation itself, which includes all of those links. So we will send that out to all of the teams along with your contact information. And great, so all of that's there. And we have a team requesting a flow chart. Is that a resource that you have available that the teams can sort of utilize as they're considering this process?
The 34, there's actually a flow chart already in there, which I kind of went through on the presentation. So it's 34 Delta Figure 1 on page 3-16.
Okay, great. And that's linked within the presentation itself, Sandy?
Yeah, I think it's right here, slide 15. So here's the 34.
Perfect.
So yeah, basically if they go to the 34, here it is. Again, this refers you to the actual chapter, section, and paragraph for the detailed information.
Okay, great. So we are a bit over time now. As we mentioned, we will be sharing the presentation as well as Sandy's information. And he has, of course, kindly offered to field any questions from the GoFly teams. And then, of course, Jim and Sue Gardner continue to be resources. Any final thoughts from Jim, or rather from Sue, and then Sandy, any final thoughts from you as well?
Thank you, Nikki, for coordinating this event. And Sandy, can't thank you enough. I think you provided a lot of clarity to the team, and we appreciate that, plus with your detailed PowerPoint presentation. So we're looking forward to working with you as we go forward.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I try to make it as simple as possible. You know, I know that when you start going through FAA regulations and guidance, you know, it's very, you know, you sit there and you look at it. What does this mean? What does that mean? So I try to make this presentation very user friendly and right to the point. Again, I mean, I would say this is probably the easiest I can make it. So hopefully this helps everybody. Yeah, if there's any other questions or anything that needs to be cleared, they're welcome to contact me directly, and as long as they copy you on their question, because you never know. Another team may have the same question, but as long as they copy you and you can collect all the information, hopefully it could help all teams out. But again, if there's any anything that comes up, you're not too sure, feel free to contact me at any time.
Thank you so much, Sandy. As Sue said, incredibly informative. And we look forward to sharing the webinar and the presentation with the teams. And thank you so much for your continued support.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right. Take care.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.